in my case, it was a mystery we were trying to solve for many, many years. I growing up, I was very active, extremely active. I surfed throughout high school, every other day. I was a member of the wrestling team, so it's in probably the best shape of my life. Around my When I was around 16, going into my junior year of high school, I noticed that I was becoming slower and slower. My endurance was becoming, I was losing my endurance, which was unusual, right? Because with all the training we go through, you would expect, for example, we had to run a mile every morning for wrestling. And instead of becoming easier for me to do as I got older, it became harder for me to do to the point where by the time I was 17, I could not complete the mile run. Doctors went to my doctor multiple times, and they assumed it was possibly asthma, so they gave me an asthma inhaler. It wasn't the case. Kind of ran through different tests. Got to the point where they just thought it was mental. It was just something that I didn't have the desire to do it. Didn't think anything of it. I did not. I stopped wrestling. I just simply could not compete. As I got older, around 20, late teens, early 20s, I started developing these bumps on my joints, on my elbows, on my knuckles, like fatty bumps. And I went to my then around 23, my primary care provider. They took the bumps out, a few of them out, did a biopsy and said, it's just fatty tissue. There's nothing, cancerous or a tumor. So they really couldn't explain it. By then, I was working, building companies. I wasn't really as active as I used to be. I knew I wasn't able to be on the water like I used to. I just simply didn't have any endurance left. And when I was 27, I was walking into work early morning and had this huge sensation of wanting to faint, just to pass out. And I literally fought it, sat there just fighting the sensation. Um, and I thought, it's just exhaustion, early morning, late nights working, laid on the floor, closed my eyes like most guys would do, thinking, oh, we'll tough through this. And I did. Uh, Went through my day, didn't feel great, but I didn't feel terrible, and drove up to a wedding from Southern California to Napa that weekend. So this happened on a Friday, the fainting spell. So that night I went up to Napa, drove up there, did, wedding, things, wine, drinking, dancing. By the time Sunday rolled around, I was terrible. I mean, it was just unbearable. The feeling of everything's wrong, right? The heartburn, just that queasy feeling. And, I love driving. I couldn't drive. I just couldn't do it. Finally got back to home and going to urgent care. I started taking Prilosec, and in the back of the bottle, uh, uh, it gives you some symptoms, and the symptoms resonated. Now, that's weird. Those exact symptoms I had. So I go to the urgent care at, 2 in the morning or so, and, they're running tests and they're trying to understand what's going on. And they identified that I had tested positive for the uh, protein markers for a heart attack. So they rushed me. They called the on-call cardiologist that night, and he, interestingly enough, asked. They explained it's a young man. He's no symptoms, healthy, and he asked, "Does he have any bumps around his body?" I said, "Yeah, actually." Funny thing you ask. And at that point, he realized that it was HoFH, very likely, and they rushed me to the cath lab to do put stents. And then that was the beginning where they all connected the dots, and the journey really began. By the time they diagnosed it, I had waited so long that it caused some decent, muscle damage to my heart. It just was deprived of oxygen. What I would love, it would be I really am a big advocate for is understanding that the disease in cholesterol in general isn't necessarily, at least in my eyes, an older person's disease, right? High cholesterol and those conditions. It's simple to test for, right? If I think back at all the times I went to the doctor as a teen, as young adult, they were doing blood samples. It was literally a matter of checking an extra box for cholesterol. And had they detected that, I would be, more confident that they would have obviously had some flags and started some preventative treatments. But they don't. It was just sort of, that is something you just don't worry about. You worry about it when you get older. So if one thing I could push out there is it's test young adults, test even kids young, and if they can identify it, it's a treatable disease, right? It's something that, if in my case, had I treated it sooner, I wouldn't have, or I likely wouldn't have had to go through what I did, right? I wouldn't have had, assumed that it wasn't a heart attack. I would have not assumed it was asthma, right? I would have been able to actually treat it earlier and prevent some of the impacts of the cholesterol.